What's going on? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and up next we are going to talk about the top 10 surprising sales I saw this week. Stay tuned. Alright, so before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. Again, I really appreciate all the comments everybody makes, the likes to the videos, the subscriptions, makes videos worth making. And so if you haven't watched one of these videos before, what I do is I watch the weekly Heritage comic auction, and I watch a bunch of books, usually around 200 books or so, and I pick out the top 10 surprising sales. But the thing that I do that's a little different is I look at the 5 that surprised me on the high end and the 5 that surprised me on the low end. So you can see some books that are maybe exceeding expectations, as well as some that were deals or maybe are trending down. So with that, let's get into these books. So number 10, and this was a high sale. This was Tales of Suspense number 52, but this one was a raw, and this one was graded as a 5.0, and it sold for $1,620. Now, this was a big sale, especially for a raw book. This is the first appearance of Black Widow, and ever since the movie, generally the book's been trending down, but if you watch one of my prior unboxing videos, I recently picked up a copy of this book because I thought it had seemed like it has gotten down to where I felt it would be, and is starting to level off and maybe even start to turn around. And with this sale, at least, definitely a strong sale. Because at 5.0s in graded copies, it'd been selling around $1,400. So this was raw, and it was going for $1,620. And if you look at that picture and you're like, hey, that actually looks nicer than a 5.0, maybe that's why they paid more. The back cover has a whole bunch of staining on it. So that is why it's graded at that 5.0. Now, this one did really stick out to me because there have been some lower graded sales recently as well. There was one on November 16th that was $1,111, so it looks like that person probably got a great price. Now, I had estimated the price of this book. Since it was raw, I'll back out the grading fees. I'd estimate it for around $1,300. And this was 25% above that estimate. And this is also one of those things I've talked about lately where I've been seeing raw books generally for the last 8 to 12 months selling similar prices to graded books. So as long as the people that are buying the books trust the seller, trust that their grading is accurate, and generally Heritage is pretty accurate with their grading, people are willing to pay those full graded prices for raw books. So just something that I've noticed, something to be aware of. Now, this is an expensive book. You can see at a 5.0, a mid-grade, it's over $1,000. You have to get down a little bit further before you get below $1,000 for any grade in this book. And so it's not a book that I'm really ever going to expect to be cheap. Even if it drops some more, maybe there's less interest in the character or something like that because she's not going to be in the movies anymore, still don't think it's going to get all that cheap. So a good alternative is her second appearance, which in this case, luckily, is just one issue later. She's also on the cover, and that's Tales of Suspense number 53. And this one is quite a bit cheaper. At the same grade at a 5.0 for a graded copy, the high was $263 in July. A 4.5 sold for $239 on October 14th, which was a new high in that grade. So even that book is trending up in the second appearance. But you can see that book is maybe 8 times less than the first appearance. So you can get a great appearance of that character, don't have to spend nearly as much money. And if the prices of the first appearance start trending back up, you will generally see that with the second appearance as well. All right, now number 9, I'm jumping over to DC. This is a low sale. This is Batman number 73 with a CGC 4.5 that sold for $930. And this is a sale that's going to haunt me a little bit. I was bidding on this one. I feel like I should have put in one more bid. I think I would have won it with one more bid. This is a classic Joker cover. If you've watched some of my unboxings, the classic Joker covers are ones that I really like going after. And this is the Joker utility belt. You've got Joker on there a bunch of times. So it's a pretty popular book, and I had estimated the price at $1,200. This was 23% below that estimate. The high was actually $1,400 from May, so it's down 33% from that peak. Now, this is something that I think a lot of people don't realize with Golden Age books, and I've mentioned this a little bit before, but this big spike in prices that we've seen even in Golden Age, is really pretty uncommon. Generally, Golden Age stay relatively flat, don't move much over the course of many, many years. And in some cases, they even go down, and so they don't, it's not like it's always up with these books. And you can see with this book, even over the last few years, this is kind of down for the price of that book. So something that you should just always be aware of. There's no guarantee with any of these books that they're going to constantly go up. Even if it's very popular characters, popular books, there is the potential that they can drop. Now, for alternatives for this book, I would just say take a look through the Batman runs, the Detective Comics runs, look down in the early issues, in the Golden Age issues, and just look for Joker covers. And there are plenty of great Joker covers out there. If you're patient, you can sometimes even find them for a deal. I've picked up a few Joker covers over the last year. It's definitely something I've been trying to collect. This is one of my favorites that I had picked up recently. This is Detective Comics number 71, which is this Joker calendar cover. Really cool cover. But my favorite Joker cover, the one that I would just love to get, is Detective Comics number 69. But that one, so expensive. A 3.5 sold for $9,300 on October 21st, and a 6.0 sold for $20,000 on November 7th. So that is not a cheap book. That is a book that I don't know when I will ever, if ever, make an attempt to pick up a copy of that book, but it's definitely one of those books that's on my watch list always for any auction that I'm looking at. But that's also part of the reason why I like searching out these Joker covers. There's a lot of demand for them, especially for the Golden Age covers, especially for those classic covers, the early ones. And so they're fun to search out, and I'm never really worried about the prices in them because Joker's one of the most iconic villains out there. He's one of the villains that people are always going to want to collect as long as they're collecting comics. All right, now number 8, this is a high sale. This is Foom number 10 with a CGC 7.5 that sold for $1,920. Now, this is kind of an interesting book, maybe one that you're not necessarily familiar with. This is from a magazine called Friends of Old Marvel. And this is technically the first time that you see the new X-Men. It's actually before Giant Size X-Men number 1. And this book has been getting quite a bit of attention lately, and prices have gone up. It is an expensive book, but it doesn't sell all that often. They don't come up for sale very often, so the prices really swing all over the place. Now, I had estimated the price of this book at $1,500. This was 28% above my estimate, but the record was actually $2,215 just from October. Now, for some other sales with this book, an 8.0 had sold for $3,500 back in May, but then one sold just on October 3rd for $1,354. And so that's what I'm talking about with these big swings. You had a jump from $3,500 down to $1,300. This one you had $2,200 down to $1,920. I mean, so just kind of all over the place with this book. So it's a tough book to price. Now, me personally, I'm not a huge fan of the magazine size slabs. I've got a few of them. You have to make that exception for the early Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles books, so I've got some of those. But with this book, this is another one where you've got to have that magazine size slab. And me personally, if I'm spending thousands of dollars on a book, I'm going to go for Giant Size X-Men 1 or X-Men 94. Because in general, I see the demand for those books being greater in the long term, more people wanting those books. So personally, yeah, if you come across this book and it's a deal, it's not like I'd turn it down. But the books that I would be targeting for the same kind of value would generally be the more well-known covers like Giant Size X-Men 1 or X-Men 94. All right, now number 7, this is a low sale. This is Silver Surfer number 1 with a CGC 4.0 that sold for just $630. Now, this is one of the books that I've been talking about with Silver Surfer that lately I have seen the prices of those books trend down. So this includes books like Fantastic Four 48, 49, 50, and now Silver Surfer 1, Silver Surfer 4, those key books for that character. Because there's a lot of hype around that character that he's going to be brought in because of Marvel making the movie with the Fantastic Four, but there is no guarantee that we'll actually see this character, and even if we do, it could be years and years from now. So I think there's just a little bit of correction happening with these books. But that, to me, is the time when you really should be looking out for them. I mean, I'm definitely looking for an upgrade to my copy of Fantastic Four 48. So that's something I'm looking for. If I see those prices dropping, if I see good deals on them, that's the type of thing I'm looking for. Now, I had estimated the price of this book at $875. This was 28% below that estimate. The record was actually $999 from just on November 10th. But it also had a $576 sale on November 8th. So again, prices have been a little all over the place, but that shows you how much of a deal you can get if you're just a little bit patient and you don't let the bidding excitement get to you. Now, the thing that is especially cool about this copy, though, and why this person got a really big steal with this book, if you look at the notes that are on the center of the label of this slab, it says signed by Stan Lee on first page in pen. And so this is actually signed on the interior by Stan Lee. It is probably a real signature. So if you crack that book out, send it to CBCS, and did their verified signature program, you might get a yellow label with that book. But regardless, I didn't notice that when this book was selling. If I did, I definitely would have bid on this book because I think that was an absolute steal, because Stan Lee signatures on these bigger Silver Age keys adds a significant amount of value. So if I was this person, I would probably crack that book out and send it into CBCS for the verified signature. But again, for alternatives for this book, I don't think you really need an alternative, because one of the, I'll say it's a positive about this one, is that it's a square bound book. And so there tends to be a lot of copies out there that have spine damage, where you have split spines or almost detached covers, and you can get some pretty nice looking copies that are actually low grades because of that spine damage. And so that's the type of thing that if you want a more affordable copy, look for certain types of flaws where it doesn't really detract from the cover art, but it does lower the grade because it's effectively a large tear on the book. All right, now number 6, and this is a high sale. This is Caliber Presents number 1 with a CGC 9.0 selling for a record $528. Now, this again might be a book that not everybody is familiar with. I've had a few copies of it over the last year or two, and this is actually the first appearance of the Crow. And I think maybe a lot of people think that Crow number 1 is his first appearance because that book is worth so much more, but it is actually this book. He's on the back cover, so if you have a copy of this one, you look at the back cover, there's a big picture of the Crow on there. And these books have been really hot this year. They spiked a lot, but they seem to have been cooling off. But this was a very strong sale. I had estimated the price of this book at $375. This was 41% above my estimate. The prior record was $456 on May 2nd, but it had dropped to as low as $333 this summer in July. So it even beat that prior record by 16% and way above where it had been sitting, down at $333. Now, this is something that I have been noticing recently as I've been looking at pricing data, because I price a lot of books every week, and we had those peaks back in the May-June timeframe, and then some pretty decent sized drop-offs, anywhere from 20, 30, sometimes even more, 40%. And I've noticed that we've started to see that chart pick back up. So we had the big spike, then they dropped, and we're starting to see these sales pick back up again. So I've been seeing that on a lot of books. There are some that are still trending down, but a lot of books are starting to trend back up. And so definitely something to watch. If you were waiting to buy books, now might be the time that you want to really look into it, because it's possible we could see increased prices again. Now, one thing to be aware of, if you're not, there are definitely seasonal swings to the prices of comics, and if you're really looking for deals, December, late December tends to be the time, because a lot of people have bought Christmas presents. They're not looking to buy comic books, so if you watch some auctions, you might catch some deals around there. So just something to be aware of with that. Now, for alternatives, this really is already the alternative for Crow number 1, so I don't think you really need an alternative for this book. Plus, it's already pretty affordable. You can see in a 9.0, pretty high grade, $528 being the record. If you look at a mid-grade copy of this book, it's going to be about $100 or so. So not a huge investment if you want to get that first appearance of the Crow. All right, now number 5. This is a low sale. This is Batman number 155 with a CGC 6.0 that sold for $552. Now, in my undervalued key video that I just put out, the book that I identified that was the most undervalued was this one, and that is why I bought this copy of this book. This was a copy that I actually purchased. Now, this is the first Silver Age appearance of the Penguin, and like I said, from my analysis of those Silver Age Batman books, I felt like this is the most undervalued one. It has a strong story with DC taking that character for the next Batman movie and potentially more properties moving forward. Plus, it's just a great Batman key, great Silver Age Batman key. You've got the dragon on the front, you've got Penguin on the front. Now, I had estimated the price of this book at $850, so this was 35% below my estimate. The record was actually $874. It was literally from about a week ago. That was on November 12th. So this was a drop of 37% from that record of just about a week ago, and so I can't complain about picking up a book like that. Now, for alternatives for this book, I think a great option is his second Silver Age appearance, which is in Batman number 169. I actually like the cover to that one more than his first appearance in 155. It's got this cool purple cover. He's much bigger on the cover on that issue. And if you get a clean copy, like I have a copy of that one that's 9.2, I believe. So if you get a really clean copy with no creases across that solid color, looks really, really sharp. So cool book. Now, you aren't going to be able to get that second appearance for as much of a discount as you see for a lot of other second appearances. I don't know why that's the case. It might be because this is the Silver Age first appearance, which is treated a little different than a full normal first appearance. That's possible, I don't know. But for example, a 6.0 of the second appearance sold on October 11th for $350. A 5.0 sold on November 8th for $275. So it's really only about half the price of the first appearance compared to about 8 to 10 times less, which is what I normally see for other first appearances versus their second appearance counterparts. All right, now number 4, and this is a high sale, another one of my favorite covers from the Silver Age, and this is Iron Man number 1 with a CGC 8.0 that sold for $2,160. Now, this wasn't a record, but this was a strong sale for this book because I'd been seeing prices really slide on this one. So this is just another example of how I'd been seeing prices drop in the summer, kind of bottom out in that late summer time period. We're now starting to see some return to strength in some of these books, and this is just another one of those examples. Now, if you've never seen this book close in person, I definitely recommend trying to get a copy of one and taking a look at it. It's got a cool background to it. So I remember when I first saw this book, just a picture of it, I thought the background was all just a bunch of rubble, but it actually has a lot of detailed imagery in the background with different people and machines and battles and that kind of thing going on in the back. Now, the same is true with Submariner number 1. I never had realized the detail that's in the background of that book, so here's my copy of Submariner number 1. And you can see here, and especially on this one because it's a really nice one, you can see all the additional detail that's back there. So these two books, Iron Man number 1 and Submariner number 1, I think they're cool books to go after, and just they really have a lot of this extra detail that's in the cover that you just maybe don't realize until you've got one in your hands. Now, I had estimated the price of this book at $1,500, so this beat that estimate by 44%. However, the record was actually $2,800 from August 2nd, and it's been hovering in the $1,400 to $1,600 range ever since then. So this was a really strong sale, up at $2,160, beating that by about $700, $600. Now, I do think it's a great book to own, but it's definitely one that I would just keep your eyes open, look for a deal, because similar to Black Widow, we're not going to see Iron Man in any of the future Marvel properties. Now, we're probably going to have other versions of Iron Man like Riri, but we're not getting the Tony Stark version of Iron Man. So that always concerns me a little bit. Like, you could see the prices of those books retreat, kind of like the person probably is feeling that paid the $2,800 for the copy of this book. But for alternatives, this one is already the alternative for the first and second appearance. Tales of Suspense 39 and 40. This is that first solo series. But a good alternative would be Iron Man and Submariner number 1. And so you had Iron Man and Submariner number 1, which I'll put a picture up of over here. And then that one actually came before these two. Then these two started, so that Iron Man and Submariner number 1 was a one-shot issue. And that's part of why it doesn't seem to command as much value as Iron Man 1 and Submariner number 1. For example, an 8.0 of Iron Man and Submariner #1 sold for $528 on November 14th, and I would say it's about a $575 book right now. The lower grades, it can be found for about $150 to $200, so definitely a much more affordable book than Submariner 1 or Iron Man #1, and a good alternative if those two are a little bit too expensive. All right, now number 3 is a low sale, and this is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1, but it's the 3rd print with the CGC 9.0 that sold for $960. Now, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles books were really the first books to really spike in price back in 2020. They were the books that started this whole price shift that we've seen with comics. And there were lots of things that people thought might have been causing it, whether it's nostalgia from people being at home from the pandemic or what, but they went way, way up. Now, they are still up from where they were back in 2019, but they've come down quite a bit since their peaks in late 2020, early 2021. Now, the only real exception has been Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1, the 1st print. While there is still price fluctuation, you can find discounts to highs, that kind of thing. That book has continued to generally trend up. Now, for this book, for the 3rd print, in a 9.0, I had estimated a price of $1,500. This was 36% below that estimate. The high was actually $1,800 back on May 27th, and it had been down around $1,200 through most of the summer, but it had a $1,500 sale on November 8th, so it looked like maybe it was trending back up. But this $960 sale was especially weak. The only sale lower this year was one for $880 back in February. So that's almost given back everything from 2021. However, if you look at 2019 sales, because the big difference here with this book is this book started moving in mid-2020. This one moved way before a lot of the other keys that we saw spike earlier this year in 2021. So you really need to compare it to where it was in 2019. And back then, a 9.0 of this book was just $200 to $300. So that's why you can see this book hitting $1,800. That's up 500, 600% from where it was back in 2019. So significant moves in that book. And that's one of the things that's made me a little nervous about selling my copies that I have of these books, because it seems like whenever you think that this book isn't going to go up again, it just spikes all over again. And it's because the print counts on these books are relatively low. Now, there are more obviously in the 3rd print and the 2nd print than the 1st print, but they are still relatively low in comparison to what you had with other books of the time period. And so whenever you get this spike in interest and people start looking for these books, the prices move really fast because there's a relatively limited quantity of them available. Now, the alternatives for this book, I mean, this is already the 2nd alternative. You've got the 1st print is obviously the one that everybody would want, but you're going to spend tens of thousands of dollars for basically any copy of that book. Now, the 2nd print, quite a bit more affordable, but still thousands of dollars. And then you've got the 3rd print here, which you can see a 9.0 is still about $1,000, and I think this is probably a pretty good price, so maybe a little more than $1,000, but it is cheaper. Now, if you want to get into the 4th or 5th prints, the 4th print is probably the cheapest one. That's when you actually get back into the normal comic size, because the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd prints are all more like a magazine size. They have to be in those magazine size slabs. But the 4th print is a normal size book. The 5th print is a normal size book. 5th print is actually pretty rare, and so that one commands quite a bit of value for it. 4th print, it's a cool cover, but it's not as rare, and so that one has gotten a little cheaper as the prices spiked earlier this year and people sent in a lot of copies to get graded. Now, me personally, the reason I like the 3rd print as that alternative is because it is more affordable, plus it looks almost identical to the 1st and 2nd prints. And so you've got that same look, the magazine size, you've got that same red and black cover, but it doesn't cost you the tens of thousands of dollars that it's going to cost you for the 1st print, or even the multiple thousands of dollars you're going to spend for the 2nd print. All right, now number 2, and this was the most surprising high sale that I saw this week, and Even more surprising, it's DC, and this is Showcase number 55 with a CGC 9.4 that sold for $5,040. Now this was a massive record for this book, and it is fun to see DC up this high on this list because I don't often see DC books surprise me at this level. Now this is another example of a first appearance in the Silver Age. This is the first Silver Age appearance of Solomon Grundy. His first actual appearance is all the way back in All-American Comics number 61 in the Golden Age, and that is a very expensive book. The most recent sale was for a 2.0 in September. It sold for $10,800. So that is a pretty rare book, a very expensive book. There's actually one of the Promise Collection pedigree copies that was like a 9.4 or something like that and sold for $100 and some thousand. So definitely a very expensive book. Now, this is a cool purple cover. It's got Dr. Fate on the cover, and Dr. Fate is going to be in the upcoming Black Adam movie, so I think that's a nice little extra or crossover that you get here. Now, I had estimated the book at $2,125. That was actually the prior record from 2019, but there hasn't really been any news or anything that would cause this book to drive up in price, so thought probably would stay relatively flat to where it was, especially since if you look at the price history of this book, it's fluctuated from generally $700 to $1,300 over the course of 10 years, from 2002 to 2013. Then it had that 2019 sale at $2,100, but really a pretty flat book that there's not a ton of demand for a book like this, for this character. But this one sold for 137% above my estimate, so just a massive sale. Now, I don't know if there are any plans with DC for this character, so if you know of anything, let me know in the comments, or if it was just two big Solomon Grundy fans that were fighting it out and wanted this rare high-grade copy of this book, because clearly it doesn't come up for sale all that often. If the last sale was 2019, it's still a big sale regardless. Now, you definitely don't need an alternative for this book. You can just go down to a lower grade. A 5.5 sold for $264 in November, and a 3.5 also sold for $180 in November. So for a couple $100, you can get a decent mid-grade copy of this book. But like I said, if you want to go the other end, because I'm generally giving cheaper alternatives, but if you've got a bunch of money you want to spend, you want to go for that first appearance, I'll put the picture up of that one, and that's All-American Comics number 61. Like I said, that 2.0 sold for over $10,000, sold for $10,800 just in September. So that is a book that you can spend a lot of money on, a huge Golden Age key. All right, now number one. This is the most surprising low sale that I saw this week. And this was Wolverine number 1 with a CGC 9.8 newsstand that sold for $720. Now, this is a book I actually always wanted when I was a kid, but it's just a little too expensive. It always seemed like it was really expensive in the early 90s when I was doing a lot of my original collecting. So I never have had a copy of this book. And for the newsstand argument, I really like 9.8 newsstands. But this one was actually from 1988, so it does mean that there were less newsstands at this time. So regardless of your stance on it, there were less copies of this book available in a newsstand. But like with all other Wolverine keys, this is a trend I have been talking about recently, where we've been seeing the prices of Hulk 180, 181, 182, Giant Size X-Men 1, Hulk 340. These Wolverine-related keys have been dropping, and I think that is a big mistake because we know Marvel is going to use that character. They effectively have to. He is the most popular character, maybe other than Spider-Man, and so there's just no question that he is a money-making character. They're going to use him at some point, and when they do, it is going to cause the prices of these books to spike again. And so seeing these books come down as much as they have, I think this is really the time. If you've been waiting to buy these books, that's the time to start looking for them. Now, I had estimated the price of this book at $1,200. This was 40% below that estimate. This book actually peaked at $2,600 on June 25th. So this one is way down from that peak, down 72% from that peak price. However, it is still up from where it was at the lows of 2020. In 2020, this was a $427 book at its low. So even there, it is up over 50%. But man, down 72% from that $2,600 sale. That one's gonna hurt for whoever bought that book. Hopefully they want to hold that book long term, because even if they announce Wolverine, I don't know if we'll be getting back up to that number anytime soon. But that's just another lesson on just be careful when you're you're bidding in these types of auctions. That was a Comic Connect sale, that $2,600 sale. Try not to let that FOMO get a hold of you, because even though I know there's a general saying where people say you only regret the books you don't buy, not the books you buy, I feel like I'd regret it if I had bought that book. But for this one, there isn't an alternative for this book. This is already like the 4th or 5th alternative for the first appearance of Wolverine, or the first full appearance of Wolverine, so I don't get the hate in Hulk 181, because you've already got Hulk 181 as the main book people want, then Hulk 180, Hulk 182, Giant Size X-Men 1, Incredible Hulk 340, then you've got Marvel Comics Presents 72. You've got all these other options that you can get for this character. Wolverine #1, the limited series. So this one is pretty far down that list, and so I don't think you really need to find an alternative. However, if you want a high-grade copy of this and you don't care about newsstand versus direct, you can get a direct copy for quite a bit less. A 9/8 direct sold for just $486 on November 21st. So you can get a high-grade copy for even less, and if you get down into the mid-grade copies, easily under a $100 book. Alright, so that was the top 10 surprising sales that I saw this week. Hope you enjoyed this video, saw some cool books. If you did, please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. I've got more videos over here if you'd like to watch some of my other videos, and the subscription button right here if you'd like to subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video.